Codemotion. I'm incredibly happy to be here and proud to be asked to deliver the keynote for the biggest developer and coder conference in the Netherlands. In my talk, I will provide some entertainment, I will show some boring facts and some technology and code. But before I start, I would like to know my audience. Like, who are you guys? So can I get hands raised of who is a developer? Come on, developers? That's probably a lot. So you are the heroes, right? So who is here a designer or an artist? Designers, artists. I would have expected more, because designers and artists are important. Those are the people who help grounding the developers to make sure that they are rooted and that they make things that people actually use or like to use. And the last group is who are here managers or project leaders or people who manage software projects. Okay, these are the most despised people of the IT industry. So probably at the same level as system administrators, of which we all know, if you don't see them or you don't hear them, then everything is going fine. So I can say that because I'm Ton Roosendaal, I'm the maker of Blender. I started the software myself, I coded most of it in the beginning. I'm also the chairman of the Blender Foundation, organizing the projects, and I'm a designer. I was trained at the Design Academy, and I like to produce films. All of that is coming together in Blender, and that's what makes Blender an interesting project. So what is Blender? Blender is 3D modeling. Blender is about making animations and character models, or you can do motion tracking, visual effects in it, you can even do video editing. But most important is, with Blender, you can make animation movies. Stunning graphics, super realistic rendering, and animation.
Falling down, I should have stopped, but I do not know how. Just for now, let's make things right. Have some fun, or at least we'll try it. You got your truth, and I got mine. So what the use of blowing my mind? Some kind of game where we both lose. Should I blame if it's not you?
So, who is using Blender? Blender is open source software, it's free. And as you know, if software is free, you get millions of downloads and users. Last year we counted that we had 500,000 downloads every month, 6.5 million per year. We had a couple of releases, so that means that there are about 1 million people online who like to have Blender, 3D software installed on their systems. So Blender is popular among students, hobbyists, amateurs, everybody who likes 3D or has a passion for 3D creation. But Blender now is also part of the commercial ecosystem, the industry. And of course, the most sexy stuff is coming from Hollywood, where we have all the TV series and movies being in production. in those companies, you can see Blender being adopted too. So here's a couple of posters of projects that have been using Blender in one or the other way. People who are active speaking on our conferences, they show examples of it. Another great example is Man in the High Castle, which is an Amazon TV series about a dystopian future where America has lost the war and is now completely Nazi. So everything you see has been modeled and rendered using the Blender software. They got an Emmy nomination for their work. Nou, dat is nog propaganda in Amsterdam. This is another example, Guardians of the Galaxy, but especially Wonder Woman. The whole title sequence for both movies, especially for Wonder Woman, has been created using Blender as well. In Europe, the ESA, European Space Agency, is using Blender for internal training, for visualization, for modeling things. Or we go to Finland, our friends at Rovio, the makers of Angry Birds, they made a game using Blender heavily. In the UK, this game, the Monument Valley, has been massively popular on the Apple iOS system. Probably people know it, all designed and made using Blender. So who's making Blender? Who's behind that? So I usually say Blender is being made at blender.org. But to support this community of developers, we have a couple of organizations. The first one is Blender Foundation. And the foundation is there only as a safe place. It's a place where we can have the funding, it's where you can have some IP, copyrights, the brand, the website URLs. So we try to keep the foundation as lean and as small as possible. And the foundation does not have financial risk. There's nobody employed by the foundation. It's just the organization to keep Blender free forever. Because the Blender project took off in the 2000s, I wanted to do bigger projects, and especially to hire people, to start an e-shop, do film projects. And that's where Blender Institute came in. It was founded 11 years ago here in Amsterdam. This is a normal company, and we do business, we hire people, we have offices, we make open movies, and we do a store, and we make money with a subscription model called the Blender Cloud. So recently, we've been expanding our activities a bit, and that's where the Blender Animation Studio came in. So this is part of the Blender organization, the part of the Blender Institute, in fact. And this is a studio where we aim at developing commercial movies using a complete free open source pipeline. So we will make some money with commercial film, put it in the cinemas, distribution channels, and share all the technology that's behind it. This is very fresh. We recently, last month, moved to a bigger place. So we're now not in the city center anymore. We have this relatively modern, semi-ugly building now in Amsterdam North, which is on this side of the river, the hot new area where all the cool startups are. Then here in this building, we will expand our animation studio and also start a training facility for people to come by and learn about Blender. But everything happens on blender.org. And Blender is a real community project. Even though there are people employed, there's an organization behind it, everything we do, also everything we do in the Blender Institute, is shared all the time. It's all public channels, and we use only the facilities as are being provided at blender.org. It's important also to underline the goal of the Blender organization and the Blender Foundation. I say it in every talk I do. It is about making a complete, free, and open source 3D creation suite for artists and small teams. I underline the complete here. A complete means that we always will attempt and do our best to make sure that the whole of the creation pipeline for 3D artists, whether that's for games or film or visual effects or simulation or visualization, but your whole pipeline should be possible to do in open source software. Blender is meant to be free to use for any purpose forever. Yeah, and then you get the million-dollar question, of course, like everybody would like to know. So how do you make money? Right, so a lot of people want to know how to make money with open source, because if you give everything away, then you will be poor and you can't do anything. But that's not really true. So we have a number of income sources. So for once, via the foundation, there are people donating. We have what we call the development fund. There are companies and individuals who subscribe to pay small amounts every month so that we have a sustainable income to give to Blender developers to work on projects. But especially the Blender Institute is our resource of income. And we have an internet store, especially 10 years ago, selling DVDs was still a business. And I mean not DVDs with commercial film, but DVDs with data, with 3D models, with our open movies, with all the data to make the movies and with the software on it. But we ended up making DVD boxes with 4 DVDs and 32 gigabytes of data. And who still puts a DVD in a computer nowadays? Nobody. So 4 or 5 years ago, we decided to move everything into the cloud. That was a buzzword back then, but it just means all our data is now available via an online subscription model. And not only that, we can also use the subscription model to invest in new productions. And that's what the Blender Cloud does. Blender Cloud is sharing data. It is creating new film, a new project, and sharing all the data for that, but it is also our production platform. So the cloud means asset management, production management, rendering management. Everything you need to run a studio is also shared via our cloud. Next to that, we have sponsors, big corporations, and people sponsoring development. For example, this is just a list of a couple of logos. These are all companies who helped us either financially, or who provided hardware, or who have an interest or a stake in supporting open source software. I would like to highlight 4 of them. The first is AMD. AMD Microsystems, they make graphics cards, the biggest competitor of NVIDIA. And AMD has their own way of talking to graphics cards using OpenCL. They don't use CUDA, but they have OpenCL. AMD supported a developer to work on this in the Blender Institute for over 1 year. But they also hired people and companies to port their productivity software and game and engines, rendering engines they had to Blender. Tencent Animation is one of the biggest animation studios in Toronto, in Canada. A couple of years ago, they booted all of the Autodesk software out, and they decided to fully become a Blender house. All of the money they saved with that, they gave a fraction, a little part, to the Blender Institute, which was enough for us to hire 2 full-time developers on exciting targets such as the new viewport rendering engine and cloud simulation. The third example is Nimble Collective. They are a startup in the Bay Area. In the Bay Area, you know, if you have a good idea and you are a little bit young, you get your millions from the venture capitalist for an exciting project. So Nimble is making a virtual workstation, or more like a virtual animation studio. Via the web browser, you can access a studio with all your tools and infrastructure to make films. And guess what? The software is they use to test all of this is, of course, Blender. So they depend on it to work, and they also invest in having a full-time developer. The last one is the makers of the Lulzbot 3D printers. They are heavily investing in Blender, also for 2 full-time developers to work on usability and workflow topics, or what we call the Blender 101 project. Now I'll come back to the main topic. So, content-driven development. What does it mean? So you make content, you drive development with it. Of course, for me, it means having fun, mostly, because making movies is the best, right? This is combining creativity and technology, and working with teams of developers and artists together to make things. It's just amazing. But it also works very well for open source. I want to show you a couple of examples of how the technology behind Blender works. People might know, but you have, for example, you want to make a piece of Amsterdam or a street. So all of this consists of what people know, 3D models. It's just a matter of putting all the things together, making layouts for scenes, testing your cameras, putting the models together, designing environments, and especially to make sure that those things are in control and that you know how to put things together and texture it, and then in the end, create something that looks like a stunning movie shot. Another topic is 3D animation. If you want to make articulated characters, you have to create immensely complicated systems behind it. Animators, actors, filmmakers, animators are really picky. They want to have all the expressions and the facials and things to work. Otherwise, they cannot convey the emotions of shots. So we help within Blender to get artists, animators, to have the right tools to make things, to make and control how things can walk or look like, and make sure that they can have the highest quality of animation production. So these are characters from the Dutch comic series Agent 327. This is what we have the rights for. We are working on a feature film based on this comic series, which will play in Amsterdam, and we'll have lots of international conspiracies. Here's an example of how art and technology also work together. We use a lot of references. Animators film themselves, or even actors, which we use for voices, to act out shots and copy it into animation film. Another example, simulation. Everything in computer graphics is mathematics and physics. And we all know, developing coding is actually also about mathematics. So this is an example of Blender smoke simulation and fluid dynamics. Original Blender innovation is the grease pencil tool. So what you see here is 2D animation, but it's actually not. This is drawing 2D in a 3D environment. So this started a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, as a tool to annotate in 3D. Right? You could make an arrow and pointing at has to be fixed, different color, different light, but the annotation tool quickly became something story artists or storyboarders were using to make quick setups for their story. And even then, later, it evolved into a complete 2D animation tool. And using a 3D tool to make 2D sounds crazy, but it actually works fantastic. So when we showed this 2 years ago at SIGGRAPH, the biggest computer graphics conference in America. People from Disney and DreamWorks came by our booth, which we had, and you saw their jaws dropping on the floors. This was something that they didn't think of it. They thought it could work, but that you have to see it to believe that it works. This is open source software. They, of course, tried it in Disney, and Disney is, of course, using Blender for some things, but you know how it works with developers. They start coding their own version. So I know in those studios, they have their own similar system to combine 2D and 3D drawing. Then we have a project currently running, which is called the EV engine. This is a Blender new viewport system. As we all know, computers get faster, graphics cards get faster. Games currently look like as if it's completely real. So what we want is to have that in the tool as well, so that you can have a viewport meant to be modeling or setting up your lighting environment. Just as a designer, you want to walk and create things in a photorealistic environment. So this project will be released as Blender 2.8 this summer, but you can already see some stunning results of artists showing how this kind of real-time technology is also really useful to integrate in a 3D tool. And you can even use it for rendering semi-finished animation shots or visual effects shots. So what you see here is a screen capture of the Blender viewport, where you can walk in, but you can also use it to make rendering. And then the last example, a fracture. There's a developer working on physics simulation for collisions and breaking and exploding stuff. There's nothing more fun than blowing up stuff in the computer. And everything is mathematics again and physics to make sure that your simulation works. So yeah, let's talk about some more important topic, the code. I got an email from the organization saying, yeah, you also should show people some code. And especially don't show it too small, because otherwise people cannot read it. Well, this actually is a screenshot of the software, my first version of Blender, written in 93, 94. In those days, let's zoom in a bit. It was all coded in C on Silicon Graphics. And this is how you start, man. You just type a function, and you give it some structures, it got some include files, and you start building and building and building. And then, yeah, 24 years later, you get something like this. That's the Blender project. So as you can see, our Blender is not using GitHub. We have our own web services on blender.org. Developer.blender.org is where we have our bug tracking systems, etc. And of course, we have our Git and SVN servers. So here you see the software structure. There is 4 important directories to know. For example, the extern is all the external libraries we use, but we copy it in our SVN because of some build, to have it easy building. The internal libraries, these are all the nicely defined modules in Blender. Some are forks from external projects, some are internal. These are all the standalone libraries you can also use in other projects. That is including, for example, our main production render engine, Cycles, is here, but also physics and other things. The release directory is and tests, that is for releasing software and our test. But of course, the main directory, the most important one, is the source. So here are a couple of our Blender players and the game engine projects to make applications. But going further, here is the Blender project. This is where all the main data is, the main functions, and everything to make the software. Like we have our own window managing system to do a subdivision layout. We have our own button system, everything drawing in OpenCL. Now, one of my favorite directories is, of course, the editors. And this is the whole UI, all the definitions of the editors and the tools in Blender. The other one is the favorite, is the kernel of Blender. It's all the 3D data, it's all the definitions of 3D data, how is the data defined, and what is access to that data. So, let's quick. Blender is available in a number of languages, because it started in C. You can still have the core of the code in C. More and more Blender is using C++, and of course Python. 10 years ago, we completely recoded how interfaces in Blender are being defined. So everything you now see, all the buttons and the ways how UIs work, is in Python control. So people can make scripts to configure interfaces. Of course, we have OpenCL, which is used for rendering, for compositing in Blender. The CLSL, important for shaders in real time. And we even have a tiny bit of Objective-C for those who like Apple and Macintosh to get that integrated well. So where are our projects? These are a couple of websites, just remember, blender.org. The developer.blender.org is where we do bug tracking and issue tracking, and where people can provide patches. We have the wiki for documentation, docs is end-user documentation, lots of other stuff. Go to blender.org and get involved. Now, I don't expect all of you to become Blender developers right away. I would be happy with 1 or 2 only, because as a very wise person said when he got his honorary doctorate, if everybody does it, must be stupid. So why then work in open source? So what is in that for you? Of course, freedom. So what does freedom mean? Everybody has a picture of freedom. Well, we are here in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands. So to explain this to Dutch people, I have this picture. So this is what it means if software would be like a bicycle. And then you get all the licensing people and the commercial software trying to own little parts, locking things up, and you end up with something you cannot use. Recognition. A lot of people working for big companies, they think it's really cool. You can work on Google, or you can work on all those other big systems, but you are anonymous, and you have to sign NDAs. You cannot talk about things. When you leave the company, you cannot take what you have created. In open source, you can, and in Blender, you can. And just to show 2 average Blender developers, The two people who got in the past 10 years a technical Oscar for their contribution to the film industry. So one is Niels, a developer from Switzerland. He did his PhD in fluid dynamics. He added it in Blender, and now he's a professor in the university, and his students are still maintaining fluid dynamics in Blender. Meanwhile, he got hired by the film industry, and he got his Oscar 2012 for work on the movie 2012, which you probably know, with the Himalaya being flooded by an ocean. The second one is Erwin. Erwin worked for me in 2000, 2001, working on the Blender game engine. Later, he went to the Bay Area in the US, and he started the project called Bullet. Bullet is a widget body library, which he added to Blender as well, and for which he got an Oscar. And the last thing, is control, right? I want to be in control of my own future. So I like the freedom, I like the recognition, but I especially want to do what I like to do, right? So also control of your own future, to have impact, to look at the future, build something together, like this, the famous user experience pyramid. You need all the layers, and in the end, you can change the world. That's how I would like to end my talk. I hope all of you will get inspired, make fantastic software, work together, and conquer the world. If you have any questions, you can email me at ton@blender.org, and I reply everything every day, or follow me at Twitter at Ton Roosendaal. Thank you.